Good day, Christ Community Church. I hope you are having an amazing day. My name is Garrett. I'm here with Pastor David. We're coming at you for week 3 of our Reaching Out small group series.
Yeah.
We've been having a blast talking about how we can reach out to the community. And I'm going to ask Pastor David some questions. We're going to continue the discussion, reaching out and how we could do practical applications off of this week's message. But let's go ahead and get it started with a question. Pastor David, when have you saw someone show you the love of God?
Oh, man. Probably more times than I could count, man. If I was really just taking stock of different things. But, you know, I think for us, most of that comes clear in times of hardship.
Yeah.
Times of tragedy.
Yeah.
So whether it's, you know, I've had up-teen surgeries, you know, like I'm not coordinated, I fall down, I tear stuff, like, so whether it's been something like that, and then people bringing us a meal, or, you know, people showing us love and appreciation, things like that, where, you know, they write a note, and it's just at the right moment, where you're at a day where you're down and you need some encouragement, and then boom, it's like this comes in the mail, and it's this note of encouragement. I would say stuff like that. Usually I reflect back more on the times where things are tough. Yeah. And then God sends somebody just at the right moment to sort of showcase His love in our lives. What about for you?
Man, I would actually agree. You know, I was thinking about like some examples of whenever I had seen someone show me the love of God. All of those actually did come in moments where it was like something was going on negative in my life. And I saw somebody just really show Jesus. So one of those times was somebody that I grew up with. From elementary school on, he actually passed away in a car accident. And I found out about it whenever I was in college. Wow. And there was this guy who was a junior, but he was like living on the freshman dorm as like the advisor. And so he knew everybody because he had to. Right. But he talked to the people he wanted to, right? You know? And so I just remember, like, I was sitting on a bench just kind of thinking through, like, everything, you know, just processing it. I mean, we weren't super close, but we did know each other. And, and he just saw me and was like, with a bunch of people that he was going to go hang out with. And he's like, I'll catch up with you guys later. Sat down, talked with me for about an hour and just made sure I was doing okay. Wow. And that just meant a lot. So what about you? What is a moment when you saw someone show the love of God to you? You can discuss that with your small group. If you're watching it on YouTube and you just want to type it in the chat with somebody, you can. Yeah,
we'd love to hear your stories.
We'd love to hear those stories. So the love of God and the representation of it, that's kind of what we talked about this week in the message. Pastor David, can you just catch us up a little bit on this week's message?
Yeah, so, I mean, you know, week 1 we talked about how our story is really connected to God's story, how He's drafted and grafted us into His story, and so there's always something to share. Even if you feel like nothing's going on in your life, we can point people back to God's big story. We can reach out that way. And then the week 2 we talked about how the Lord wants us to be able to share, to celebrate the good things He's doing, but then also really to talk about the things that are tough, like to share how He's shaping and shaking us. And so whatever we're going through in this chapter of our story, whether it's pain or peace or whatever it is, the Lord wants us to use those things to reach out and identify with people around us. So many times it is when people are hurting, and we can identify with people's pain and share the difference that Jesus has made. And so week 3, this past Sunday, we talked about what are some practical ways that we can just flesh out and live out the love of God. You know, there's the old saying that you're the only Bible that some people will ever read, right? You know, and so what are ways that practically we can actually step out and sort of pull skin onto God's love and be a visible representation of the love of God to people in our community? And so we looked at Acts chapter 9 and saw this story about this great woman named Dorcas or Tabitha, depends on whether you're calling her by her Greek or Aramaic name. And so this woman was a disciple. She was a disciple of Jesus, and she's in this town with Jews and Gentiles. She was probably a Jewish lady. It doesn't tell us a lot about her except that she had wonderful eyes. Not like as a physical feature, but she noticed the needs of other people. And so, you know, in today's culture, everybody's so insular. Everybody's hyper-focused on themselves. but she looked out for the needs of others. She noticed when people were in need. And so she gets sick, she dies, and then they call for Peter because he's one town over.
Yeah.
And they're hoping and praying that God would do a miracle. These people, she's noticed their needs, and she's just going to help meet the needs that they have. She has been such a representation of the love of God to the people around her. They're like, something's got to happen. And so they send for Peter, and he comes. Why don't you read what happens when Peter gets there?
So when Peter gets there, it says in verse 39 of Acts chapter 9, so Peter returned with them, and as soon as he arrived, they took him up to the upstairs room. The room was filled with widows who were weeping and showing him the coats and other clothes Dorcas had made for them. Mm-hmm. But Peter asked them all to leave the room. He knelt and prayed, turning to the body. He said, "Get up, Tabitha." Again, that's the same person.
Yeah.
And she opened her eyes. When she saw Peter, she sat up. He gave her his hand and helped her up. Then he called the widows and all the believers and presented her to them alive.
Yeah. What a cool story, man.
Yeah.
So, it's they wanted to have this time before the funeral, and they're obviously believing that something can happen, or they wouldn't have called Peter.
Absolutely.
And so they have this desire, like, we're going to miss her so much. I mean, she's meant so much to us. She's been this visible, physical representation of the love of God in our lives. And it wasn't just for people who were believers. There were lost people at her funeral, too, saying, this was the way I knew the love of God, because she was in my life.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, it's an amazing thing. So she took her passion. She was passionate about making clothes.
Yeah.
She saw and noticed the needs of the widows, people who knew Jesus and people who didn't know Jesus. And they're literally standing by the bedside saying, "See, I'm wearing this. I wouldn't have anything to wear if it wasn't for her."
Wow.
She showed us the tangible love of God and introduced us to God by meeting our physical needs.
So along those lines, why is it important that we also do things to show people the tangible love of God, as opposed to just telling them about the love of God? I know that kind of gets into where James talks about faith versus works. Right. I'll show you my faith by my good deeds.
Yeah.
But why do you say we need to accompany that representation of, or presentation of the gospel with a representation of the gospel?
Yeah. I mean, I think especially in our culture, people are not willing to listen to what you have to say until they know how much you really care.
Yeah.
Right? And when we follow a model of meeting people's physical needs and then transitioning that into a beginning of a relationship to meet their spiritual needs, we're following the model of Jesus, right? Like Jesus looked to people and he would meet their immediate needs, or what their felt needs were, their physical needs. But then in the process of doing that, he would be able to explain to them how their bigger need was a spiritual one. And so the physical way to show the love of God by, taking a meal or helping someone when they were sick, or visiting and encouraging somebody, or whatever it was. Like those physical manifestations of the love of God were then transitioned into the ability to have a deeper conversation about people's real needs, their spiritual needs. That's what Dorcas did. It said that they knew the love of God because she had done these things for them by making clothes for people who were saved, people who weren't saved. That was just her passion, her mission that spread out. It started with the church, and then it spread out to the people in her community as well. And so, I think it's one of those deals where for Dorcas, she had this impact that maybe the people around her didn't even know until she was gone. Right. Because I think she just did it quietly. It was just something that was part of her life. It wasn't like part of a program. It was just, this is who she was with these other people who needed things. She would notice a need, step in and meet that need, and then use that as this opportunity to address a deeper need too.
Man, that is so good. Okay, but along those same lines, whenever we're talking about doing things that are helping people that are in need, there are a ton of 501c3 charity organizations that do a good deal of good in the community. If you've watched any NFL games,
absolutely,
you know there's somebody's charity foundation that they are promoting that's doing something helpful in the community, and a lot of which are doing great good. They just don't believe in God. In the same way that we do. And how would you say what we're doing if we meet people's physical needs is different than what these charity organizations are also doing?
Yeah, that's so good. Yeah, that's a great question. So I think the first difference between believers doing something to meet a physical need and sort of showcase the love of God is the motivation behind it, right? So the reason that we're doing something isn't so we get credit. The reason that we're doing something isn't so that we feel better about ourselves.
Yeah.
Or that we have a sense of purpose. I mean, that's not a bad thing.
Right.
But that's not the reason and the motivation behind it. Jesus says, when you give a cup of cold water, even to somebody in my name, right, then I'll never forget that. It's like you're doing it, whatever you do for the least of these, it's like you're doing it for me. And so the motivation behind why we're doing it is that we look and we notice people's needs, but we notice their greater need as well. And so we're trying to have this opportunity to serve people as we serve Jesus, right? Wow. It's like, okay, I want to showcase God's love because He served me. He's shown me this unbelievable love I did not deserve. And so I want to showcase what that looks like for people. And the only real way can't come through just in works.
Yeah.
It has to come through in this message plus works. And so that's what the difference between Christianity and another charity out there is they may be doing some of the same works, but one is the motivation, and then number two is the message. Right? And this is where I think some of us as believers sort of fail.
Right.
Like we do good things to help people, and then, I shared the love of God. Well, you did partly. Right?
That's good.
But Jesus says our love should be so otherworldly that people see our good works and then they glorify your Father in heaven. Right? So It's not just that we do the works, but there has to be the message somewhere. Right? Like for it to really be effective, it's not just a charity, it's the motivation behind the charity plus the message of Jesus that there is a greater need. And we want to help you see who can meet the greater spiritual needs you have as we're ministering to your physical needs.
Yeah, man, that is so good. So I guess along those lines, how could we keep that priority focused on the gospel whenever we are doing these good things?
Yeah. Well, I think one of the big things is if you do something that's out of the ordinary, people will ask you why you're doing it. Because the culture is really skeptical, right? Like, why are you helping me? Why are you bringing us a meal? You don't even know us that well.
Yeah.
Like, why are you giving to this, not Kickstarter, what do you call it? Like the website where people
GoFundMe.
Why are you giving to this GoFundMe? Or whatever it is, right? And I think there's powerful moments. Peter says, always be prepared to give an account for the reason that you have hope inside of you, right? Like, so I think part of it is being willing to share that motivation, right? Of saying, well, the reason that I'm doing this, man, is I have felt such love from God that I just feel compelled to showcase that love to other people. And so you're like, well, you don't even know me. But like, even when I was an enemy against God, God reached out and showed His love to me. I just want to overflow with His love to the people around me. I want to be like Jesus. He always saw needs and He noticed. Like, He saw people where they were. He met them where they were. But then He brought them into relationship with God.
That's so good. That's so good. So we bring people into a relationship with God, but we also use the service that we do as an open door, kind of like a foot in the door to kind of bring the greater message of, like, hey, this cup of cold water might meet your physical need for thirst right now, like Jesus said to the woman at the well, but I can show you one that you'll never have to come and get water from this well again because you'll have living water. Yeah, and that's so good.
Well, and I think that sometimes there's a readiness for that from people, and other times there's not. And so, I think sometimes Christians feel like, well, I can't do something where I'm serving other people and then thinking about a message because that makes people feel like a project. They're not projects. People are not projects. Relationships are not projects. But I think that's a wrong mindset to think about it. Like what you're saying is, God, I want to give you the opportunity to open the door for conversation. And a lot of times that happens by addressing people's real needs. And in the context of you sharing the love of God by meeting people's genuine needs, then conversation just pops up.
Yeah.
And so if it does, then you're ready to share the message. And if it doesn't, then you've still shown the love of God, and you can tell the motivation behind it. Even if they're not ready for the message, you can still share the motivation.
So along the lines of motivation, and this wasn't in the questions that we had talked about earlier, along the lines of motivation, how do you keep your motivation pure? Because a lot of Gen Z people identify with causes, passion, yep. project. I think a lot of that's just a pendulum swing from previous generations, but I'll digress off that topic. But a lot of Gen Zers, that people that are coming up that don't remember 9/11 is kind of that age bracket.
Right.
It's a history lesson, not an event that they lived. They're identifying with places to work that are making a social difference.
That's right.
And they really want to get behind those things, but they do it without God largely.
Right.
And the motivation there is kind of like, I don't know but for us, it should just bubble up without, how do we keep that motivation pure so that we're making a difference, not just, like you said, a project for people being a project because it's something we have to do out of religious obligation, but...
Yeah, that's really good. I mean, you look at companies like, not so much anymore, but like Tom Shoes, right? Yeah. It's buy a pair, we'll give a pair. Companies like Charity Water, right? Where it's like you give up your birthday, and then and the owner is a believer, right? They go and drill wells. You raise money to drill wells. He's a believer, but it's not an overtly Christian organization. It is a charity, but people want to team up with businesses who give back. I mean, there's a reason why Walmart gives back. There's a reason why Target gives back. Do good or whatever it is that their slogan is. I mean, I think there is something innate inside of us. We were made in the image of God, and so generosity is something that people appreciate, whether they're believers or not. And there is this desire to have something where you're attached to something bigger than you, where you leave a legacy in some way, where you make an impact in some way. And so, I mean, I think that's inside of us, whether you're a believer or you're not a believer.
Right.
And so, but I think it really comes down to hanging on to that motivation of why we're doing what we're doing. We're not doing it so that we look good. We're not doing it so that we feel better about ourselves. We're not doing it so that we get praise and we can say, look at what great people we are, right? Like the reason that we're doing it is because we can never outlove the love that God's given to us. Man. Right? Like there's no way that we can ever surpass the love that God's given to us. And so we've received so richly the love of God when we didn't deserve it. And He noticed us at the point of our true need. And so as believers, we should walk around with giant eyeballs, right? Like seeing the needs of other people, noticing. And then as we hear the Holy Spirit say, you can do that.
Yeah.
You can do that.
Man.
Then we do it with a motivation of love, not for the thank you. Right? Like we're not doing it so we get thanked. We're not doing it so we get praise. We're not doing it so we get appreciation or recognition. We're doing it so that we reflect the glory and the love of God. And hopefully there's an open door to be able to not just meet physical needs, but to bring the message.
That's so good. That was just like last week. The answer was better than I thought the answer was going to be.
Nice. But go Holy Spirit. Go Holy Spirit.
But seriously, like I loved what you said there. Like the desire is in every single person because the desire comes from God innately. But without God, whenever the thing that we think we should get in return is not met, whether that's a thank you, whether that's a hug, whether that's notoriety or recognition, is not met, Christians don't burn out. Whenever they're not praised, because we're just doing it because we know the one that loved us so much that He gave. Oh man, that's so good. Okay, so whenever we were talking earlier, Dorcas or Tabitha, the Bible said, or you were telling me, like people realized that she wasn't there. She made that much of a difference in.
What are we going to do?
Life.
She's not here.
So how can we live that kind of life?
I mean, I think it starts by asking God to reveal what you're good at, what you're passionate about. Because I think sometimes we try to put square pegs in a round hole. Right. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, I'm going to take people a meal. And it's like, if you've never cooked a meal in your life, like, maybe you should just Uber Eats that thing. You know what I'm saying? Like, you can pick up a phone and help somebody who's sick that way.
That's great.
Like, don't try to make the meal. But no, I mean, I think part of it is trying to figure out where you're passionate, where you're gifted, things you're good at, that you already really enjoy doing. Like, like Eric Liddell, the runner guy, he's like, when I run, I feel God's pleasure.
Yeah.
Where are areas in your life that as you do these things, you just sense the pleasure of God, and you just really enjoy it? Well, then think of ways that you could do that, not just for yourself, but that you could spread that to other people. Maybe it starts with the members of the family of God, but then hopefully it spreads beyond that to reach out to the people around us. I mean, I think that's probably how it started with Dorcas.
Yeah.
We don't know 100%, but as part of the Jewish culture, it was normal to take care of orphans and widows.
Yeah.
And so before there was really, a benevolence ministry that was set up all over the world in different churches, they were relying on people to meet those needs. And so she loved to make clothes.
Yeah.
And so she sees these people who need clothes, and she loves to make clothes. So she's going to, now it doesn't say she was a wealthy person.
Right.
I mean, Luke is great with details. He gives so many details, and he talks about the wealth of other people, especially other women that help support the work of Paul's ministry, let's say.
Right.
And so it doesn't say that about her.
Yeah.
I mean, she may have been giving out of her poverty. We don't know.
Wow.
But like whatever it was, she just, like these people are standing around her bedside weeping, saying, what are we going to do without her?
Wow.
And I wonder, like, if we were gone,
yeah, I mean,
would it just be like the family of faith who says that, or would there be lost people who's like, I don't even know if I really believe in the God that they believe in, but man, I'm going to miss their love, right? Like, I wonder if there's people out there that would feel that if we were lost, if we went away.
That's a serious come to Jesus question. Just to reflect. Okay, so along those lines, for somebody that's just starting out.
Yeah.
I know for me personally, like, it's really easy for me to say, let's wait for a church event and then get involved in making a difference.
Yeah.
But outside of the church events, which, we have those and those do a great job. And I think that there's benefit in organization and coming together and doing something big.
There's power in doing it together,
one day for sure. But just as making it an everyday practice as a follower of Jesus, what would you say would be a good place to start for that?
Pray that God would make you a noticer, right? Like, you can't meet a need that you don't notice.
Wow.
And so I think that most of us are absorbed in our own things. And that when we walk into a room, even if we see other people, we see them through the lens of our agenda, of what we need accomplished in that moment or that time period, right? Like, so whatever room you walk in, like maybe this is the challenge this week. Whatever room you walk in, say, God, help me to notice someone in need.
Yeah.
Right? Maybe that's a need spiritually. Maybe that's a need emotionally. Maybe that's a need physically. Help me to notice people who are alone or feeling lonely. Help me to notice people who are sick, who are my neighbors, that I could do something to help. Help me to notice people that are discouraged or depressed. Help me to notice people that feel used up at work and like their work is never noticed. Like, help me to notice people that, feel down.
Yeah.
Or walking through whatever it might be, right? Like, so it starts with noticing. And so I think I would just make that my prayer. We tell our kids, Katie and I tell our kids all the time, God has made you noticers. So when you walk into a room, like, you're going to look for stuff that other people don't see. You're going to see people sitting by themselves. You're going to see people that other people make fun of. You're going to see people that get left out. You're going to see it because God's made you a noticer. And he wants you to be because there's so few people who really notice. And so, pray that God would make you a noticer.
Yeah. And so
that's a good place to start.
That's really good. And so as we transition into small groups, maybe just pray that together. Lord, help us become noticers of what's going on around us and how we can make a difference. And so, do you have anything else before we transition that you want to share?
So for your groups, if you're meeting together in a group right after this, I would love for you to brainstorm. Who are people that you know are in need, either emotionally, physically, spiritually, in need of encouragement, in need of physical assistance, whatever it might be. The people that you guys know as a group. And then I want you to make a game plan that in the next couple weeks, here's one thing we're going to do, right? Like, just together. One thing, we've noticed a need, and then God's going to use us to somehow meet it. If you're watching by yourself at your house, I would just say, make it your prayer every day this week when you first wake up. God, make me a noticer. I want to see. And then whenever God does make you notice one, this week, like, just make it your commitment. I could do that.
Yeah.
I could do that. And share the love of Jesus with the right motivation. And maybe God will open the doorway for the message too.
That's so good. And for that person that's watching by themselves, how could they get involved in a group?
Yeah, so on Sundays, you can come and see our glass wall display in the lobby. All sorts of different groups for every different age range. We'd love for you to do that. There's also available online, cccmooresville.com.
Absolutely. And we meet Sundays, 9 and 11, both online and in person. And we're going to go ahead and transition into small groups. If you're meeting together, if you're on YouTube, then we'll just see you next week. And everybody have a blessed week and reach out this week in your community.
Have a good one.